JBG today at lunch and met with one of their people. And
okay, good evening, everybody. We're now recording the meeting. Welcome to the Site Plan Review Committee meeting for Block W in Crystal City. Before we start, there's a number of, since it's a hybrid meeting, I have the whole script that you've probably heard before, but we have to go through again. This is the subgroup meeting for the Crystal City Block W project. And we're holding this hybrid public meeting, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy that was adopted on July 7, 2022. Members of the SPRC subgroup for Block W are participating here in person and virtually through electronic means. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to a hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the SPRC webpage, the project webpage, the county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to SPRC email subscribers. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Turn off the sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it's appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve only two purposes. One is for the SPRC subgroup members who need technical assistance, and for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of this meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussions. Those who are planning to provide public comment will need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat does not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. The subgroup members participating virtually, if you wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn your video feed on and raise your virtual hand in Teams. We will be monitoring the video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak. If subgroup members are participating via phone today without the video option, please announce your name and group you're representing now, and I'll verbally check in to see if you wish to be recognized, as you don't have the video feed option. I don't think we have anybody on the phone that's listed up there. Members of the public. For our members of the public who'd like to provide feedback and comment, you'll be called upon to speak at the end of this meeting and will be allotted 2 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for the virtual attendees, or provide your name to staff if you're here in person, and you'll be added to the speakers list. Finally, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the county website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. That said, those announcements are done. Now, since we have a lot of people here, let's go around and identify who's here. First, we'll do in person, and then we'll do virtually.
My name is Leo Starley. I'm with the Planning Commission.
Leah Bagley, Planning Commission.
Andy Chakowski, SK&I Architecture.
Laura Sanavia, JPG Smith Development.
Carolina Palstrastis, also JPG Smith Development.
Matt Allman with Venable.
Eric Castle with Crystal City Civic Association.
John Mingus, Sports Commission.
Benson Forestry and Natural Resources Commission.
Nick Giacobbe, Aurora Highland Civic Association.
Kevin Hine, Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Sarah Rubalcava, Housing Commission.
Matt Suzek, County Planning Commission. Sergio Bergachero, Development Services Bureau.
Kevin Lamb, Planning Division.
Chrissy Wallentush, Planning Division.
And around the corner.
Police Berto, Road Slate, Transportation.
Collier Cook, nearby.
And now we go to our virtual people. Do we have any members of the SPRC subgroup? Chris, go ahead.
Good evening, Chris Slatt, Transportation Commission.
Very good.
Hi, Mike Dow, Crystals in Pentagon City's council.
Thank you. Who else do we have? Anybody?
Elizabeth Whitney.
Elizabeth Whitney.
Hi, this is Elizabeth Whitney representing the Climate Change, Energy and Environment Commission.
Welcome. And Claire.
She's a guest.
Okay, all other members of the public, we don't have to identify you virtually. If you want to speak at the end, that's what the chat, put your name in the chat and we'll register you there. So we're pretty.
Hi, I'm Claire Pascacello. I'm representing Parks and Recreation Commission.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Any other commissions?
We have a few design team members on the line.
Yeah, this is Glenn Warren with Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority Planning Department.
Okay, observing. And if JBG Smith has more of your team, they want to identify themselves, you can call them out because I don't know who they are. You'll have to do that.
Bud and I believe I saw Matthew. Yeah, and Sheila just raised her hand.
Matthew Cook.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Sheila Nail. I'm with Bowler, the civil engineer for the project.
Okay. Are there any others?
Matthew Coop is also here with Bowler.
Hi, Matthew Coop, also with Bowler.
Greg Swanson's also here with JBG Smith. And then we have Abed also on from SKNI. I think that's the rest of our team.
Okay, great. Also, to members here in the room, remember to speak up because the microphones are above you. So we want to make sure that our virtual attendees can hear everything that you're saying. We do have an agenda for tonight, so I want to make that clear what we're going to be doing before we get into the presentations. Chris, you want to call that up so people can see it?
Yes.
So remember, we're looking to have 2 SPRC meetings, so we will be covering a number of topics tonight and then more updates and more topics at the next meeting. Okay, make that bigger.
Nice.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, we're doing land use and density today, site design, architecture building form, and then we'll move into open space. Not surprising, the first 3 tend to have a lot of overlap, so I will not be surprised if one bleeds into the other. That would be okay. But I do want to hold off on the open space stuff until once we wrap those first 3 topics up. Open space is obviously a big topic for everybody here, so we recognize that, and that's why it will be carried over into the next meeting, because I'm assuming that we'll continue to have a discussion. Of course, if we wrap it up, great, and then we can move on to the other topics of the next meeting. But that's the way I'm looking to plan this out. And I we'll be leaving time at the end for public comments. That's it. Why don't we move to the presentations on this project?
Okay.
Chrissy, are you first?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I always get this wrong. Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. So as Commissioner Lantelmi noted, we're here for the Block W SPRC #1 meeting. The agenda topics for which we just went over, but we'll look at again in a little more detail on this slide. So I'm going to keep this presentation pretty short. We've already had an LRPC meeting in December and also an online engagement session in February for these same agenda topics, and then we'll talk about the second half of the agenda topics at another meeting, likely within the next month. We don't have too many revisions to the slide deck or the information today, other than a couple architectural changes, which the applicant will show in more detail on their slides. And okay. So again, this is a refresher for those of you who've been along for the public review of this project. So this is Block W. It's currently undeveloped and home to the sand volleyball courts in Crystal City, as well as a workout park, both of which are owned and maintained by JVG. There is also a playground and an outdoor seating area. There's a service road that's accessible from the 26th Street South and Crystal Drive intersection that runs north through the site, connecting to a gravel parking lot used for construction worker parking, and an underground tunnel that connects to a parcel east of the railroad tracks that is also used by JVG for construction worker parking. That service road also provides parking and loading access to several buildings north of Block W. Running parallel to Crystal Drive, there's also an exit ramp for the elevated airport access road, which provides connection to, sorry, I have some sort of timer on, to Crystal Drive from the airport. This exit ramp must be removed in order for the site to be developed as planned, and the removal of the exit ramp is also called for in the sector plan. Site is zone CO, and its designation on the county's general land use plan is office, apartment, hotel, low. Block W is also located within the boundaries of Block Note 1, which is the Crystal City Coordinated Redevelopment District, which permits heights and densities as called for in the Crystal City Sector Plan, where sector plan goals are being met. The applicant proposes a rezoning to CO Crystal City. This slide is an update from information shared at the LRPC meeting in December and summarizes aspects of the sector plan that we are discussing here tonight and how the proposed project either conforms with or deviates from the sector plan guidance. This information has not changed since the LRPC meeting. You'll see they are in compliance in regard to the proposed land use, density, building height, and provision of retail for the site. Apologies. And staff has found the proposed development deviates from the sector plan in regard to size of provided open space, location of service and loading access, provision of certain architectural features, and guidance regarding the building envelope. We'll look at each of these in a bit more detail in future slides. Again, as a refresher, here are all the action items for the development proposal, which included rezoning to CO Crystal City, a new block plan for Block W, minor site plan amendment to remove area from site plan 167 in Crystal City, and a new site plan for Block W. So taking a closer look at the new site plan, the applicant proposes a mixed-use building that is approximately 85 feet in height and contains 370 residential units and about 3,360 square feet of ground floor retail. They also proposed a parking ratio of approximately 0.50 spaces per unit and approximately open space in the size of 35,000 to 38,000 square feet. We'll look at that in more detail as well. In an effort not to repeat exactly what you've heard during online engagement, I've gone ahead and provided just a quick assessment on the first discussion topic, which is the land use and density. The proposed land use conforms with the sector plan's guidance for the site, and the rezoning is supported by the site's inclusion within the Crystal City Coordinated Redevelopment District. In regard to density, staff notes that the base density is 72 units per acre, and the applicant proposes 92 units per acre. The density that is proposed above that base is supported by the site's inclusion within the Crystal City Coordinated Redevelopment District and shall be provided in exchange for community benefits. The site design should be familiar to you by now. The site's been designed so that the building is situated on the southern portion of the site and the open space is on the northern portion. The applicant has introduced a vehicular service road from Crystal Drive between the proposed building and the open space that's intended to provide access to the underground tunnel and connection to the properties to the north. Parking and loading is accessed from an additional service lane on the southern frontage of the site. Okay, we'll take a little closer look at outstanding concerns on site design. First, staff is still reviewing the transportation-related impacts of the introduction of the service road mid-block. We'll plan to have updates for you all on those aspects at the second SPRC meeting. Secondly, as currently situated, the service road reduces the amount of open space that could be provided, which may affect whether the applicant can achieve the sector plan minimum required open space. Third, the service road interferes with the provision of a coordinated frontage fronting the open space on the northern facade of the building. And fourth, the location of the parking and loading and access deviates from the sector plan's guidance that these elements be placed on the eastern frontage of the building adjacent to the railroad tracks. So these are all elements that are proposed in the current site design that we'd like you to keep in mind for discussion for this evening. And then again, as a refresher on the building form and height, the proposed building is 7 stories with a 2-story podium, and the upper 5 stories of the building overhang that podium base. Renderings are on this slide. Looking a little closer, because the building is much shorter than was envisioned for the site, the proposed building form is technically inconsistent with the sector plan's guidance on podium and tower composition. Additionally, staff has noted that the proposed design lacks tower setbacks and also lacks distinctive building top, both features that are called for in the sector plan as shown in the image on the left. Tonight, we'd like to hear from you as to whether that sector plan guidance is appropriate for a building of this size, among other aspects of that guidance. With respect to architecture, the applicant has made some revisions to the southwest corner where an architectural feature is prescribed in the sector plan. The applicant will describe specific design changes in more detail in their presentation. We'd like your input as to whether the revised design achieves the intent of the sector plan's guidance for this frontage. You can see here the difference between the original architecture and the proposed. I'm sure the applicant will have the same side by side. The applicant's also made revisions to the northern facade where the sector plan calls for a coordinated frontage framing the park. Staff finds the revised design an improvement over the original design and would also encourage your thoughts on this detail as well. Here also is a revised design for the northwest building corner, which the applicant will describe in more detail. Do keep in mind that there is architectural guidance in the sector plan there's not architectural guidance in the sector plan for either this corner or the Crystal Drive frontage. It's on the upper stories of the building. In regard to open space, the applicant is providing approximately 38,000 square feet of open space for the provision of Crystal Park as called for in the sector plan. The diagram submitted to the county identifies 34,837 square feet of open space, but as the applicant will show in their presentation, they may be able to reach or nearly reach that 38,000 square foot minimum recommendation in the sector plan. The planning for future open space will be conducted after the completion of the Block W site plan. So we can discuss that a little more, what that'll look like. And then we are going to leave the open space discussion there for now and discuss landscape and streetscape features at the next meeting. Looking at the public review process, we're now at SPRC meeting number 1. Again, as previously stated, we had the LRPC meeting in December and SPRC online engagement in February. We're here talking the first half of the SPRC topics tonight, and then likely next month we'll have the second of 2 and the final SPRC meeting on open space part 2/landscaping, transportation, sustainability, community benefits, any other topics that may arise or as a follow-up to this meeting. After that, we will be looking for the project to advance to advisory groups and commission meetings and then on to the county board. Okay, just to quickly summarize the online engagement opportunity that was held last month, we did receive a lot of comments, so thanks for everyone who participated. A lot of comments are split in regard to their thoughts on the project, but most of the comments received were in line with the agenda topics we kind of outlined in the presentation, which were in regard to building height and density, site design, and specifically to the service road and the airport access ramp, the size of the public open space, comments on building form and architecture, and then also on transportation in regard especially to those bike lanes, pickup and drop off locations, and then parking and loading access. And then a summary of the common topics is posted on the project's webpage, as well as a link to a comprehensive list of all the comments received. So on the project webpage, which is on this slide, you can, again, all of the comments we received for the project, all 308 comments are within a form that you can access there, as well as a summary of common topics, common threads that were picked up by staff, and the applicant and staff have responded to those common topics. And that concludes staff presentation.
Thank you, and I guess we can then move on to JVG Smith, so take it away.
Great. Just 1 second while we project. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for having us. As I mentioned, my name is Dolores. I'm the vice president within the JVG development group who's leading this project. I'm here with several of my colleagues, and both myself and Andy will do part of the presentation for today. But before we jump into the specifics, I wanted to lay the groundwork for what we're going to be discussing. As Chrissy mentioned, the site context. So bear with me. It's a lot of the same information that we talked about in LRPC. We'll go quickly through this. Land use and density, then the existing site constraints, the site design, and then I'll hand it over to Andy, who's going to be talking about the building form, the architecture, and the building height. Yeah, something's off on the screen. Give us 1 second. Sorry, we were noticing that the whole picture wasn't projecting. Yeah, it's cutting off. Share my whole screen. Okay, there we go.
Yep.
Okay, so as you guys can see here on the left-hand side of the screen is our site. It is Block W, just north of 26th Street and south of 23rd Street. The 2 things that are on this block is this Crystal Park, as well as our development site. The next screen here on the site aerial What we've highlighted here is basically the existing conditions. So to give you guys a flavor, if you haven't walked past this area, what's currently within the site, we have the temporary park area on the right-hand side, which is right next to the railroad underpass and the service road. We're fronting Crystal Drive to the west of the site, and then the airport ramp, as well as the existing parking that Chrissy mentioned, right now is being used for construction parking. We have some site context here. The top two images are from the ramp, or indicating the current architecture there, as well as the bottom, which show the temporary park on the left-hand side, and then the service road condition on the right-hand side. From a land use and density perspective, our proposed plan is a 5/2 residential building, just shy of 400,000 square feet, 370 units, and 4,000, or roughly a little bit less than that from a gross perspective on the retail density, and then 200 spots within the structure at a 0.5 ratio. And then here, really what we wanted to talk about is our proposed plan in the context of our JBG portfolio. I think it's important to provide visibility to what we've been doing for the past several years. So the last 4 entitlements that the firm has gone through, all within Crystal City, as many of you guys have participated a lot in, have been high-rise buildings. So we are going to be delivering, or will be in the process of delivering just shortly here with the 2 residential buildings for 1900, 7 new high-rise buildings for the neighborhood. And so when we look at the opportunities for housing across Crystal City, we're excited to be providing a different typology here. One that in particular, if you look at the portfolio as a whole, has larger units and is catered towards 2 and 3 bedrooms, and can be accommodate cheaper rents and larger for families. So that's the goal here. From the existing constraints, before we jump into the specific site, one of the things that we wanted to provide some highlights on and an update on was the ramp. And while, as Christy mentioned, this is not something that will be determined through the 4.1 process, we did want to make sure that we were talking about this, because we do have to bring the ramp down in order to build the new building. And so from a removal perspective, the sector plan does support the removal of this. We've been working with Sergio and VDOT on the particular process with VDOT, which will determine the different adjustments that we will be doing to the sidewalk to ensure that we still have a pedestrian path. So one of those things that we're doing is actually narrowing the lanes. You can see here the whole area in blue is the area that we will be providing improvements to. The ramp on the right-hand side is what will be coming down, but we will be making improvements all the way to the second pier to give you guys some of that transparency. And as I mentioned, one of the things that we're going to be doing is expanding the sidewalk, making it ADA accessible by reducing the lanes within the ramp or the overpass there. From an extent of one of the major, do you want to let that person? Okay. One of the individuals, well, we just want to make sure everyone's involved. One of the constraints that we have here is the service lane. And so we have 5 buildings to the north of our site that have to be served by the fire and service lane that enters into our site. So we've designed a proposed plan that actually allows for that lane to stay open so that the fire marshal can actually go and service those buildings to the north of us. The next slide. Another constraint that we had that we'll talk about in detail and that actually shaped the way that we were thinking about our design is the railroad underpass. So on the east side, the constraint here is unique in the sense that it's not mentioned in the sector plan, but it's one that we can't avoid when we're thinking about our design, particularly because there are multiple parties that are responsible and have to have rights protected for access in and out of that tunnel. And so that's not something that JBG can actually just have go away. So we have to work within those constraints. So wanted to point that out. And then here what you see is the overlay of the constraints that we've mentioned on our site with the 2 additions of the Pepco duck bank and then the railroad tracks and the buffer of the easement associated with that. So that's an area where we can't build. And so a larger site, which you would see in the sector plan, just continues to get smaller and smaller. So want to be responsive to these constraints. And from a site design perspective, we've studied a lot of different components and layouts of the site, and we're excited to be proposing this. And what you see here is essentially all of our constraints within the site, but also with the ability to prioritize the open space on the right-hand side and really ensure that we're meeting that 38,000 square feet that we talked about. And I know the 4.1 necessarily did not hit it, but we've worked with staff to ensure that we're getting closer to that number. As we heard in LRPC, this was a big one to make sure that we were meeting. You can go to the next slide. And here we have the sector plan with the constraint overlay. So one of the things that we wanted to point out is the sector plan, the illustrative nature of it, and how that actually pairs with the existing conditions of the site. So what you see here, as I mentioned, there's no reference to the underpass and the railroad pass that is through the middle of the site. So that's something we have to call out. We also don't have a major duck bank called out in the sector plan that goes straight into the proposed development site, as well as the existing easement buffer that actually also eats into the development site. So wanted to pull all of that together here for you all. So what we have done, and Andy's team and Sheila's team, Bowler, really working through what does the sector plan suggest? Where is it actually placed the service road? You can see highlighted there. It's on Crystal Drive. That's what's recommended based on the illustration. And then in order to ensure that we are pulling back and not hitting those constraints, we're reducing the site that we're developing on to allow for the service road to stay in that location. And here you see our proposed plan with the constraints overlaid together and how it all works, allowing for us to respect the constraints while still optimizing the design of the building and the open space. And then to walk you around the building, we'll go into the specifics of this, but just laying the groundwork on the illustrative proposed site plan. We've got residential and the lobby facing Crystal Drive, anchored by retail on the northwest corner. We also have fitness wrapped around the park. That's a most active use. We have a bike entrance to the south of that, as well as a pet spa, and then parking entrance and loading to the south. We wanted to ensure that our more active uses were facing the park and kind of bringing that activity. And Andy will talk about some of the ways that we're doing that with some of the facade as well. And then we'll call out the fact that we have Pudo here wrapped around next to the park. We think that the park is going to be a pretty active use, and so want to ensure that, you know, this is a location that can be geotagged and we're avoiding some of the conflicts that would otherwise happen on Crystal Drive. And in order to ensure that folks kind of are guided to that area, we have a secondary lobby entrance that actually allows residents to exit onto where the Pudo is located. And from an open space perspective, we talked about this. It's a little bit hard to see, but the hash in hot pink and yeah, the color right there, that's the extra area space that we're talking about adding to the easement to make sure that we can hit that 38,000 square feet. And I'll pass it over to Andy.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Czechowski with SK9 Architects. So we're thrilled to kind of finally be here. I feel like we've been working on this for quite a while, but it's really great to finally come here and present it to you. So I'll just kind of start with, you know, the railroad, the CSX railroad. You know, we're this building abuts the railroad. We knew this would influence the design of the block, both from a sound and noise perspective, but also from potentially an aesthetic perspective. So we started looking at like classic industrial precedents, and we started reflecting upon their kind of their scale, their color, their texture, material palette. And then we were thinking to, you know, design a modern interpretation with emphasis on, you know, metal panel additions that would complement historic structures, while introducing contemporary brick detailing that would add texture, depth, and shadow to the building. And while researching the Crystal City, the history of the Crystal City, we discovered that there was a former brick kiln nearby, and collectively the team thought that it would be fantastic to reintroduce the spirit of that building into Crystal City on this site. So I guess go on to the next slide. Material samples So this sort of inspired the palette. We have the samples here on the table as well. So we've been thinking about, the warm, rich, familiar Mid-Atlantic red brick, along with, sleek, kind of modern black brick accents, both for the base of the building and then panels within the red. We'll talk about that. And then the masonry being paired with warm and rich metal panel. So we're looking at like dark bronze for the body of the building, warm grays for the bays, and then using this copper penny accent color to really highlight, architectural features on the building.
Just feel free to, you can feel it, you can pass it around if you want to.
So this is sort of the massing diagrams and articulation of the building. So kind of speaking of this copper penny idea, we conceived this building as sort of a massing as a two sides of a coin due to the distinct two frontages of the project. So the head side being the Crystal Drive frontage, with the primary feature being the 5-story dark bronze canvas sort of on the top layer of the diagram. So that yellow streak is a 5-story dark brown canvas that sits upon a 2-story dark brick base. And the secondary, sort of the third slide, we have these series of warm bay projections that run along Crystal Drive, and they act like a series of train cars, sort of inspired by the train tracks, running down the track. And then the dark brown canvas inflects at the northwest and the southwest corner to create two ends, creating distinct geometry and acute geometric corners to articulate these special features of the building. And the tail side being the track side of the building, sort of the bottom diagram, is primarily, the feature is a 7-story masonry wall extending from the entire frontage from the north to the south. And the importance of this is that the masonry wall really mitigates the noise to the units from the CSX trains. So those things are pretty loud. I've been out there when the trains go by. So we're really trying to mitigate the noise. And we've done this in other projects in Alexandria along the train tracks, where the brick wall and special insulated glass, help reduce that noise impact. But we recognize it's a long facade, so we introduce these pair of vertical breaks in the form of recessed hyphens. And these breaks, they break down the perceived length of the project into shorter, more proportional pieces. So the next slide, we'll go to the Crystal Drive facade. So this west facade is set by, like I said, the 5-story dark bronze metal panel canvas is set over a clear and distinct 2-story dark masonry base with rich modern, the iron spot bricks that are on here on the table. And off of this dark brown canvas, we project these warm gray metal panel bays that run, north-south like train cars. And each one is separated by clear hyphens accentuated by hanging balconies. And the walls of the bay are visually syncopated with varying window arrangements and accented darker panels to create the variety on the larger bays. And the base running along Crystal Drive is activated north to south. We have the retail at the northwest corner, which is called for in the Crystal City Sector Plan. Adjacent to that is the building lobby, the lounge and leasing center in the middle of the building. And as you go south, we start introducing the residential stoops to the ground floor units. And then this dynamic northwest corner with the copper penny accent panels and with that frame balcony assembly creates a visual cue. I mean, this is part of the reason why it's inflected, so that when you're, there's nothing there now. So we want to create this sort of iconic moment at that corner that draws people down to the park, to the retail, and to the building. So go to the next slide. So this is the CSX frontage. So we're turning to this east facade facing the train tracks. We introduced, again, the warm, rich Mid-Atlantic red brick. This long facade is separated by the pair of recessed bays that you see, sort of the vertical hyphens that separate that. They create sort of 3 distinct, equally arranged, kind of proportional building segments, recalling the more historic precedents that we recalled to earlier. So it's a more manageable kind of facade pieces that march along the train tracks. And the masonry facade, like I said, it mitigates the noise for the units. So it's really important for us to have the masonry back here. And you can also tell that the windows, we've used a lot of single windows and double windows, and we've worked with the noise consultant. That's sort of the if we did, we don't want to do much bigger because the windows can really let in a lot more noise. But these facades, this facade, it actually, we layer, there's a lot of detail in this facade. So we layer with ribbed masonry, detailing ridged, in various locations along the wall, as well as dark brick accents that are placed within to create this, these changes in color and texture combined with the window fenestration create this syncopated and visually interesting kind of mosaic along the train tracks. Out of kind of very pedestrian, but friendly materials that we're all familiar with. Let's go to the next slide. So this is sort of the before and after, the initial 4.1 on the left, and then sort of the current design. So we've been, working with staff and responding to their comments. The big comment specifically was that the building lacked a top. And we understood sort of the rationale behind that. So what we did is we ended up extending the parapet of the dark bronze sort of up, and we lowered the roof of the bays down so that dark bronze now runs continuous from the north end to the south end and visually connects the entire building. And it is above the train cars, so it really visually connects the entire building and helps that the reading. Let's go to the next slide. So now we'll kind of talk about the coordinated frontage. This is the part of the building, the north facade facing the park. We really think that this facade, responds to the shape and scale of Crystal Park. The geometry inflection of the plan is formed by the angle of the park, the service road, and putting a new streetscape against the building with sidewalks and street trees, et cetera. So we feel that this shape is really responding well to the shape and nature of the park. So this form, and we've allowed the warm broad facade to return all the way to the east and then sort of connect with the railroad facade, the CSX frontage to the east. And then we think that the ground floor is activated. We have the retail at the corner, we have the pickup and drop off, the Pudo right in there, so there'll be pedestrians coming and going. We do have the residential amenities on the entire ground floor. The fitness center is located there, so we'll have activation and eyes on the park at that location as well. And then we're really considering that sort of the left side of the screen underneath the brick masonry. That'll essentially be the back door of the building. So we'll have the bike access and the pet access through there. So that'll be a regularly used entry for the building as well. We can go to the next slide. So this is another thing that we really wanted to introduce is sort of the relationship of this new retail in this corner to what's happening across the street. So, we know that there's the Trader Joe's is going in, there's new retail. So we know that this new road and the park and the angle all kind of respond and sort of, caress the park and then sort of point back to the new retail across the street. And again, this is the sort of the 4.1 on the left and the initial submission and sort of the current design on the right. Again, just listening to staff's remarks, you can see the progress in the initial 4.1 to the current. Initially, I think we wanted to reintroduce the Crystal Drive bays on the north side of the park, but the additional layering may have seemed, kind of staggered and unnecessary. So we simplified the facade, which now extends the northwest corner and frames the park, back to the masonry facade on the CSX side. And we feel these enhancements really unify the facade now. It creates a stronger top because the parapet's a little bit higher. We're actually providing a detail at the top of like a shadow line at the top of the cornice to help reinforce that. It's more of a modern kind of slick detail to create that little shadow line. And so I think those are the kind of the improvements, but we've also been able to maintain the balconies because we really want the activation of those residential units looking at the park, having the eyes on the park, to have that, to create the safety that everybody wants. So quickly, I'll kind of talk about the south end. This is the service and the loading. So, this is pretty simple what we did. This is the south end of the building. We've reused the existing curb cut that's currently there, and we've extended this service lane towards the CSX tracks. And so we've essentially created an alley, adjacent to the underside of the existing airport access road. As stated in the Crystal City Sector Plan, loading, service, and garage access should be located on the side service lanes and alleys. So this is exactly the condition that you see here. We've set that up. And access is visually minimized from Crystal Drive, due to the relative width between the building and the airport access road. And that width is kind of, we really thought about this width a lot. It's adequate to provide vehicle movement and turning radiuses in there. And it also allows adequate distance for the residential units above to have some visual clearance from the airport access road and roadway. And then, we've been able to keep Crystal Drive activated the entire time. So we have all these ground floor units marching around, and that corner unit actually turns and returns. And there's a slight inflection in the plan, but it's going to, help block and conceal the service areas beyond. And this is sort of the last bit, the southwest. This is the southwest corner.
How many slides do you have?
Two more.
There's some more.
Okay, great.
Well, this is a key one. This was a hot topic. So this is the architectural feature at the southwest corner. Again, originally we thought that we simply return the train car in the first slide, provide a straightforward solution, but staff didn't think that was adequate. So then we sort of echoed the northern corner and we brought the copper accent down to there in the middle slide. And again, that was sort of not sufficient. So then on the third slide, and this is part and parcel with adding the top of the building. So we're letting the top kind of run down, and then we shorten the last bay, and we reintroduce the bronze feature. So it sort of unifies the north and the south corner. And then as you can see here, we've extended, I just said that, we extended the bronze canvas. So the corner bay, we've actually inflected this corner bay out as well, so that you catch glimpses of it as you're coming from the airport, as you're coming from the west, and you're coming from the south. So it has this inflection. And then we've really recreated this corner balcony assembly. There's actually light coming through the top, glistens through. And now we're adding a distinct kind of bold geometric pattern to the balconies, both in the north corner and in the south corner. And so we're hoping to find a geometric, pattern that can go on those that sort of complements the railway theme with some strong linear lines. And then obviously cladding in the distinct copper penny, so it sort of unifies the building architectural features. So that's the end of the architectural piece. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, let's move on to our agenda then. Why don't we actually start with site design? Do we have any clarifying questions around the table that anybody wants to raise on that topic? Sure.
And I know that some of this would be in community benefits, but just can I ask, did I hear you say that this would be less expensive rent, you think? Okay. And so it will be below market rate, or it will be market rate? Because market rate is around here is usually expensive.
I mean, the intent is that for it to be less than some of our other buildings that we're developing. So if you're considering that market, it would be a little less than that.
And then
it's per square foot, so if it's a large unit. So.
And then what is the mix of, you said 2 and 3 bedrooms, what is the mix?
Roughly 1/3 of them is the larger units. And obviously that will continue to change as we refine the building.
And I know that this would be discussed more in community benefits, but normally it's in these slides. Any contributions to affordable housing?
We're still working through.
I think we have to work with staff about
Yes,
that.
we're premature for that right now at this point. So we were talking about it's land use density, site design, then we can move on to architecture. But those first two really work together. Yeah.
Just a real quick question. What about the area south or east of the access road? It looks like there's a little area that's in there. Can you tell us what's going on with that little area? You know what?
Pull up a map so we know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What are my questions?
Yeah.
You want back there?
Yeah, if we'll project so you guys, everyone can see what we're talking about.
Yeah,
we'll grant it.
Yeah,
About
that area right there, yes. The area.
Area where is this?
Which?
Yep.
Service Road, Service and Fire Road.
So south of that?
Yes.
Yeah, right now it's just planted trees, so really nothing going there. We'd be happy to put that towards the open space easement.
It'd be nice to be able to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's no, what's the word I want? There's no place that can go, right? Because the service road takes up all the space north.
Correct, it would just be kind of that triangle zone.
Okay, so that's a good point. So that's leftover space we could talk about when it gets to landscaping and park use. So
Right,
hold
right.
that thought and raise it.
Yeah.
So that will be part of that discussion. Thank you. Other clarifying questions? Yeah. Ann.
I have a bunch of questions about this slide. Can I raise
Sure.
them? Very sorry.
Yep.
My apologies. But the slide coming for you? Yeah. Where's the slide? Okay, my first question to you is, have you thought about switching the fitness in the lobby? Because we really do any Prudhoe or Crystal Drive, and we need bike lanes there. And so, because the lobby's there, people are gonna stop there, and that's gonna be a terrible traffic mess. And why not? What is your thinking in having the fitness over there in the lobby on Crystal Drive? And I think visually, people are going to be seeing a building from the park side. You're going to be so close to the street and the buildings across the street. I don't think you're going to really appreciate the lobby if it's on Crystal Drive. So that's my first thought. I don't know if you can do that. My second question is, I see your parking entrance. How do you've got underground parking too, right? How do you get here? How do you get into the underground parking?
So, do you want to talk about?
The ramps internally. So.
Okay, it just keeps going.
Yeah.
Okay, it wasn't clear from the drawing that I could figure out.
Sure.
Yeah. My next question, and it's good, it's clearer on your slide than on the staff slide. The residential units, I see 4 of them open onto the street, but all of them don't. And if those are all separate units, is there a reason why some of them don't open onto the streets?
They're a little smaller studios, so
Okay.
you kind of walk right into the living space. So the other ones, the larger units have the studios. It helps the spacing too.
But I forgot what it was.
I can kind of answer about the lobby. I think distinctly JVG would want a Crystal Drive address for the building, so the lobby would want to be there. The fire truck wouldn't go there from a safety standpoint. But also there's actually topography in the park, so that drops. Crystal Drive is high and the tracks are low, so it drops several feet. So that the fitness center actually works well there because it sets several feet above the sidewalk as the sidewalk goes down. If you can see, we actually have staircases sort of in the back by the dog and the bike area. We have staircases back there that get people up.
I think you're really going to need to figure out who on Crystal Drive because they're going to be. My final question was already asked by Eric, and that is what was going on in back of on the east side. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we have a couple of the virtual commenters. First, we'll go to Elizabeth Whitney and then Mike McDowell. Elizabeth, you're up first.
Thank you. Did I understand correctly? And I don't think I did. There was a proposal to relocate that access road across the park. There was a slide that visually made it look like it was going to cut into that open space there. I think it was slide 20 or thereabouts.
So we have the slide, the illustration of the sector plan. Is that what you're referring to?
Was that one that must be 19.
Okay.
Yep, so what you could see that's cutting over there, that's what the sector plan calls for in terms of the location of the service lane.
Sorry, Dolores, just to jump in, to clarify, the sector's plan does not specify that the service road be located there. There is one image in the public open space section of the sector plan that shows it there, but it is merely an illustrative image. So the sector plan doesn't clarify where to put the service road. Just want to point that out.
But it does show it there.
It shows it there in one specific section, but in no other instance in the sector plan. But does it recommend that that's where the service road should be routed? Right.
I would call that like just elucidating the ingredients that need to happen on this site more than actually determining the design.
So it's the illustrative image that's pointed to in the sector plan where the current sector plan shows us.
Okay, so there's no proposal to like bisect the existing open space or the open space that's in the plan. Okay, thank you.
Actually, you just addressed my question, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And other in the room, clarifying questions, otherwise we can start moving into comments on the site design, if anybody has additional comments on it. I'll take the chair's privilege of density. I just want to reiterate, I'm a bit disappointed that we're not using all the density on this site. It's substantially below what otherwise could be built here. And I understand that, you know, stick built is cheaper and thus can potentially have lower rents, which is great. I'm not complaining about that at all, but we're also leaving a large number of units on the table. So again, it's your right to go ahead and do it. This isn't a showstopper. It's just, I'm expressing my continued concern that we've seen a number of projects come before us, that this is just the latest one that is not taking full advantage of the density that's available under the zoning, which has changed to allow more density. Anyway, other comments?
Subject are we on?
We're on site density and land use density and site design.
Right, a land use question. The underpass under the railroad, that's not shown in the long-term sector plan. I'm not sure if that's omission or commission in that case. But what is the long-term plan for that land on the other side and maintaining that access in perpetuity?
So the easement serves several different parties that have access to the parcel on the east side of the tracks. So it's not something that could be eliminated without pretty substantial negotiation with those parties. Currently, it's just used for construction worker parking and overflow material storage. It's used by the railroad to access their tracks so they can do maintenance and repair. It's not shown as programmed in any way in the sector plan. And we don't, I know we've had some discussions with the staff about what could the future be, but it's still a little unclear.
That's one of the areas that maybe we also talk about community benefits when we get to that. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I would chime in on that that access road seems like it's a real pain in some ways for you guys. So let's see how can we use it proactively instead of just having it be a problem for everybody. So yeah, we're very, very interested in how the other side of the railroad is. And we would, I guess one thing that I'd kind of like to see is I'd like to see the other side of the railroad included in this site plan. Something that, you know, it's related, it has to be a part of it. And so, you know, I would think that that would be a part of this site plan procedure to include the other side of the railroad. And so I would suggest that as far as a site plan to really look at the site, you're really talking about the other side of the railroad because it's connected. This is the only connection to it because it's controlled by the Parkway and National Park Service. So there's no other way to get to it. And so, you know, why isn't that a part of this site plan? So that's a question I have.
Okay. Yeah, actually, do we have any answers for that parking lot track? It's used as parking lot after construction, you know, the access by the tunnel. What is quite the status of that? If we go over that again, sort of, is there any possible other use other than a parking lot that could be done for? Who owns it? Is it planned to continue to be owned by whoever owns it now? Just what is going on with that?
Well, it's owned by affiliates of JBG Smith, and it's subject to all different sorts of easements for everything from utilities, sort of basic stuff, to more complicated stuff like rights that CSX has to enter that property and do maintenance and repair and get onto the track corridor. In terms of its development potential, I would have questions about that just because it's just sort of a question mark under the sector plan. It's not shown with, you know, a recommended height or a recommended density, recommended use. I have logistical questions about like how you would actually physically get there to do anything. I don't want to say it's impossible, but I don't think it's something that's been explored really on our team.
You, I can understand wanting to keep it around as staging for construction.
Yes.
It's an easy use, doesn't bother anybody, it's fine. But strike me long-term, either have the Park Service take it over. I mean, it doesn't seem to be gaining you anything once construction's done. Could it become part of the Park Service land? Because it is adjacent to
The Parkway, that's right.
That would strike me as a potential great use, because it would just revert it to a natural area. So, I wouldn't mind if you had any thoughts on letting people know here that you are thinking about it down the road.
I was also going to comment on that parcel as well as the open space area, just to recommend that even small parcels of land can find excellent uses in connection to nature and environmental benefits. For example, that would be an ideal spot for a pollinator garden or other biophilic elements. I noted in the presentation materials that there's a sense of openness to what that open space could actually comprise. And with volleyball courts just a few blocks away, it strikes me that that open space could be designed to connect not just to the area's industrial past, but to an environmental future, where some of those design elements can really be brought to life and complement the more sort of steel, brick, copper elements of the building itself, with green elements and infrastructure that can provide benefits that are more than just recreation, but create spaces where people can feel benefits of that connection to nature. And I believe that was reflected in a number of the comments that were received as well for that biophilic design.
Also a great place to watch the trains go by. Anyway, let's, since that's really not part of what we're here for, so let's move on from that topic anyway. Anything further on density, site design, land use?
I just have one.
Yes.
Is there any possibility to increase that 1/3 of the units will be 2 to 3 bedrooms at all in this unit, because it is not as tall compared to our other buildings in the area?
We're still refining our unit mix, so I do want to mention that. I also do want to mention with an average square footage though of over 1,000 gross square feet, the rooms are also just more spacious than what we have in our pipeline right now. We're focused more on 1-bedrooms proper than the studios and the junior 1-bedrooms, the inboard bedrooms in our portfolio. So even though there are some smaller units, they are bigger, but it is still going to be refined. So
I mean, I understand that. It's just like within Arlington as a whole, the need for 2 to 3 bedrooms is very important. And we have seen new buildings come online that are the studio 1-bedrooms, and that's not really, it caters to a certain type of person, type of people. So if it's like any possibility, that would be kind of good.
We'll definitely take a look at it and figure. I think this is the reason why we're particularly excited, because this is one of the buildings that has the most mix of that, right?
Yeah.
So we're pushing the envelope on what the portfolio has, but totally hear your point on that. So we'll take a look at it. Yeah.
Okay, Mike Dowell is next.
Oh, yes, I wanted to agree with Eric's question about the property on the other side of the park, of the railroad tracks, because that's figured large in a lot of the more creative thinking over the years. So interested in what can be done there. Can you just, I'm just wondering if you could clarify for me, the service road will vehicles be able to use that? Because otherwise that's a dead end road. I'm just thinking about the pickup and drop off. So I just wanted to make sure I understood, where's that service road go? Will cars be able to circulate through there, or is that effectively a dead end for folks?
So it actually, you could circulate all the way up to the top. There's an exit at the north of those 5 buildings. You can see there.
Okay, so cars, practically speaking, going to be trying to pull U-turns in the middle of that.
Yeah, we're also working with staff in terms of the turning radius and right in, right out and things like that. Working with DES in particular on that.
Yeah, Mike, I took it in my car. It actually, you can exit on Crystal Drive in the north there.
Yeah.
It's sort of weird, but it goes through.
Yeah, I remember doing the Crystal City 5K, so we used to do that. Yeah, it does seem like something to pick up. It just seems kind of awkward, but maybe we'll pick that up in the transportation section.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
So,
go ahead.
forgive me, I don't know if this is a site design question or open space question, because they seem to kind of overlap to me. So if I'm too soon, just
I'll let you know.
bring it up later. Forestry Commission, trees are the big deal. Open space is the biggest deal. I'm not really, your designs look beautiful. I'm not going to comment on the brick. They look great. When we met last time, we talked about the possibility of having a slightly taller building to reduce the footprint, to give you more flexibility to do things. And it seems to me that if you were to have a slightly higher building, you can meet all the residential and retail needs, and also run your service road right along the east entrance all the way from where your parking entrance is, not even cross the open space, as it does with the other buildings along that route. And then it would give you more flexibility to have more open space. You could still have the entrance to the underground underpass, but it would just give you more flexibility. So help me understand why you're not digging into that, because it would seem to solve a lot of your problems that we're talking about here.
From a height perspective, you mean? First, I'll tackle that one. I think there's balance between being able to underwrite the deal and making sure that we can move forward with construction and providing the additional housing. And the building typology of a 5/2, we just cannot go higher than that. So then you're looking into a high-rise building, which is what we've been building in Crystal City. And that caters towards smaller units, higher rents, and then we're back at square one in terms of all the items that we had talked about. And so it's a balance between being able to provide this additional housing product and the typology that we're working with. So that's to answer your question. And we did go back and try to look at, could we make it work within it? And the answer is it's very difficult.
Definitely. And like simplified terms, it's a 5/2. We can't do a 6/2. So it's not, we've looked at, it just doesn't work structurally. So then that's what Dolores was saying earlier. You actually do have to change the typology. It's not as simple as, you know, you can just shrink the footprint and add another floor without changing the actual construction materials that are necessary to support it.
So forgive my ignorance, relative ignorance on this. So 5/2 means you're building it out of wood, you're not building it out of other materials, so you're constrained from going higher.
Correct. So
have you considered doing a hybrid type of building where you have some of one and some of the other to maintain costs and still do it?
5 levels of wood over 2. The podium is not made out of wood. That's what's the structural support. So you can't do 6 levels of wood over the 2 floors of concrete podium.
It's a building code limitation.
Right.
IDC won't allow you to go over 85 feet with the wood.
Thinking
And
more in
fire,
terms of,
your fire marshal won't let you.
I don't want to belabor the point. I was just kind of wondering about have a portion of the site be taller and made out of stronger materials, and another portion of the site, not on top of it, but next to it, be lower to stay within code. Is that something that would be possible to consider? Because that would then give you options to reduce the footprint.
Essentially building 2 separate structures, and one being a smaller footprint high-rise and one being 5/2.
I wouldn't say high-rise, but higher than 7 stories.
Understood, but to Andy's point, it's a height limitation. In the code, they differentiate them differently. But we hear you as far as the concerns. It's, again, it is a limitation on that specific typology and what would make sense and how we could deliver units now.
I think it's a creative idea, one that we can take a look at. It's not one that we've explored. But.
Yeah, there is a new building in Falls Church, where Holden's is, it's a mixed use. And I think they have 3 concrete and wood above that. How did they do it? I might be wrong on that, but when I counted the floors, it struck me that it was higher than the 85 feet. And it is a mixed building.
Falls Church?
Yeah, it's right at Broad and Washington.
I mean, you could do more than 2, you could do 3, 4 levels of concrete, but as soon as you put wood, the wood limited to 85. So you can add additional concrete.
No, right, but then you have to cut the number of wood stories.
With the top, the roof of the wood could needs to be 85 feet.
Right, see, and that's why you have to look at that, because it might be a topography issue there. but
Sometimes,
somehow-
yeah, if you're on a hillside, depending on how it's measured, you could potentially.
Either ways, you might want to just take a look at that and see how they were able to manage that. Because that's where the voltage is going in there. Because it is a mixed development.
What
Mixed
intersection
use.
did you say?
Broad Street, Washington Street in Falls Church.
Okay.
Yeah, Route 7 and 29.
Thank you.
Anyway, sorry. Nick, you were.
No, I didn't.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm good.
No other comments on density, land use, site design. We can move on to architecture. And if anybody has questions, clarifying questions on architecture, now's the time. Yes.
How big are those corner balconies? What's the size?
They're pretty spacious, actually. They're going to be the 2 corner balconies. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, I think they kind of vary because they're sort of triangular. So I think when you walk out, you have 8 to 10 feet, and it sort of tapers down to the point. So they're pretty spacious. It'll be a nice amenity for those units, and those are generally the larger units. Yeah, corners.
Yes, one of my questions, I love the new balconies, I think they're great. And are they accessible by whom? And so it's just the people who have the.
Well, that's a private unit, yeah. That'd be
Okay, private unit. And it's, for the top one, it's open above it?
Yeah, we can design them so that they're open above.
And how the elements harm the balconies at all?
Well, I mean, you get wet if it's raining.
The substance in them.
I mean, harm the element. Yeah, we would waterproof it and everything, yeah.
I think a nice, when we standardize the dimensions of our balconies too, we think of what can fit here, right? So if you wanted to have like some sort of little patio umbrella, it'll fit in comparison to when you have those like tiny little balconies where you can barely fit a bistro table.
Yeah, or a Juliet balcony.
Put the bicycle there and that's it.
Yeah, see, that's what I was trying to get at, how big they are, because I wanted to see, it's hard to see on a graph what size you're talking about.
I think comfortably, table and 2 chairs easily can fit there for a conversation. Yeah.
And they're for a single unit, they're not accessed for both sides, right?
Yeah, those are single.
Those are single.
Yeah.
And the regular balconies on the north side, they're basically rectangular. And how do the sizes compare to the corners?
So the balconies on the north side, I think they're generally 10 feet wide, and they're about 5 feet deep. So you can get 2 small tables or 2 small chairs on a table up there. Hang out, yeah.
I have a request for those participating virtually. Would someone from the JVG team be able to take a photo of the building materials that are on the table and share it in the group chat for the meeting, please?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, I have a few comments. And they might not be in any particular order. So I will begin with first of all, thank you staff and thank you the applicant. I believe the improvements are great, particularly the north facade. I think really starts to talk about a tripartite composition without overdoing it with the material switch. That inflection point really does create a more nuanced approach with the continuity of the material. So I think that's particularly successful improvement in the facade. On the track side facade, if you can go to, I think slide 28 out of the 35, I would urge the base to also be continuous. And I think you are sort of 99% there. It would just to not switch the color, per the diagram on the slide before or on the little corner, I think the diagram is very successful. And that sort of hyphen at the bottom, if that is a continuous thing, it goes back to that sort of train track analogy where that would be the track and it would be continuous and it would create this platform. And I think it goes a little bit to the sector plan with the base, being articulated. So I think that's a minor change that I think would just create a continuity in color and texture.
You're suggesting a dark base, possibly.
That's up to you. I think the color right now is very successful, and that goes back to the warehouse precedents that you were looking at. You know, the whole construction of precedents on warehouses is they tend to be very simple and very single-minded palette. You know, so I think the example you had is sort of, I think what's sort of happening here, you create this sort of framework that's of a single material, and then you have the insertions or the additions or the renovations, and that where you start to create that patina, right? And one of the examples you showed had like a warehouse that then had this addition on it. The addition had a completely different brick, you know, so that's sort of, I think, what would make sense here, instead of breaking what would be the sort of historic base, you know, I think just to stick with that narrative. I think I continue to have difficulties with the location of the loading. And now more so, it's right below the architectural feature corner. And I really think if you Google Earth it, you can see that loading dock is going to be visible from a very long distance. So again, the paradigm on the park side, I understand that, you know, the gym and all that stuff, but the truth is the park is at an angle if you look at the plan, and even in the illustration, it really is planted beyond sort of seeing that corner. I think you referred to it as a back door. I think the loading dock would be much more successful there and create an opportunity for an urban gesture. And again, this is from an urban perspective, you know, on the street, you want activity, not a loading dock. And I think that corner, the southwest corner, is quite prominent per the architectural feature, right? And I think the fact that it's under a bridge shouldn't be sort of misleading, because I think that's actually a park under there too. So we are gonna have activity there. We are gonna want eyes on the street there also, if not more than on this side. So again, I think the loading and the loading dock on the sort of utility road has a little dead end. It's like perfect for it. It's almost designed. You just have to put it there. It wouldn't interfere with traffic. You know, it definitely wouldn't interfere less with the sort of garage entrance. And I think also it goes a little bit to the sector plan, which wanted everything on the east. Did I say that right? But since we don't have an east facade, I feel like, okay, well, then let's at least favor the east as much as we can on these uses. I think the improvements are good. What else? The materials for the base, I think I mentioned that already. Active facing the park. Again, I question that a little bit. I think that corner is not going to be quite as active as you think it's going to be. The industrial architecture tends towards less variations in material. See the diagram. I think that's it. I'm surprisingly short. But yeah, I think the top's really good too. So thank you, staff. Thank you, design team, for sort of, you know, going back to fundamentals on this.
It's a little bit surprising.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Yes.
Comments, right? Or two comments, right? First off, I want to congratulate you on the building. I think I really like a lot of the features of the building. I do like the solid top across. I really do think that's going to define your building in a lot better way, and I really like that. I also really like the corner balconies, really making them exciting, and those can be really powerful for you, and I think really a feature of the building and really make your building stand out. So I really like that. Contrary to my dear friend down there, I like the loading dock by the overpass, because I think the overpass is going to hide it. I personally think it's better there than near the park, where you actually people will see it. I think it's going to be kind of hidden back in there, and I actually like it back there. So that's my view, but I'm not an architect. So, but again, I would compliment you on lots of the architectural stuff I really like. One thing I haven't seen is what it looks like on the inside, because I know you have a courtyard. And I would like to see a little something on the courtyard. Just how are you going to design it? What's it going to look like? I know it's maybe not visible from the outside, but it will be visible from the outside from higher levels from other buildings. So if you could give us some idea of what's going to be on the interior courtyard, what's it going to look like? I think that architecturally is important, as I say, because you have so many tall buildings, you see down into it.
I think that's certainly something we can do in the second SPRC as part of our landscape. We can incorporate some of the images.
I believe there are, in the 4.1 submission, there are images of the courtyard in there.
Yeah, but it wasn't here, and,
right.
and things change, and I really would like to see something on the interior courtyard, again, because of the buildings, so many tall buildings in our area. You do see it, and it does affect other buildings other than just your internal building. So, and it's part of the thinking of how residents would see it, because they're going to obviously come out to the courtyard. And so we want to kind of see if it just has some, I think it'd be very helpful. So that's it for me.
Can you just connect that that's, Leo, were you saying that your suggestion for the loading dock was to keep it on that southern end, but move it towards the east, or move it somewhere else?
Kitty corner.
Northeast.
To the northeast corner.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add in that staff is continuing to look at the loading and garage access points, and then also the new proposed service road with the application materials that we got from the applicant, like the traffic study, and meetings are ongoing with the applicant, but more to come on SPRC number 2.
That'll be part of the transportation, of course.
Yep.
Yes.
Good. Other questions, issues on architecture? Right.
I'll make a quick request. So for next presentation, if you could have a street view of that corner, pretty far back, essentially the rendering of the corner feature, so we can sort of do a little bit of a live commentary on that. Like if you do a Google Street View, it's fairly on axis with the road because there's a little bend there. So you're just going to see it. Now, I mean, again, maybe you want to see it, but I think even from the building perspective, that's going to be a little bit of a sort of calling card corner. And I think, putting something a little nicer on that corner bodes well for the building itself.
Talk about SPRC too, but we did study a northern loading dock initially during our concept, and we can get into all of those points too.
Too tricky? All right, fair enough.
Loud and clear. For sure.
Happy to share all the studies. You
All right.
shared it with staff.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So.
Okay, other architecture questions?
I also just uploaded the materials. Apologies that I'm a little slow, but they should all be in the chat. Let me know if you can see them.
Great. Yeah, in my comments, I think the architecture is iteration, so definitely moving the right way. As I mentioned earlier, putting as Commissioner Sarli mentioned, putting that top to it, I think that this is now, it's not a tower. This is horizontal, so that embraces the horizontality of it, which is fine. Let's be honest about what it is. So I think that helped. It's a nice frame. And I go along with the other comments Mr. Sarli made for like the facade facing the tracks. I think we make really good points on that. And yeah, those are my comments. We can now move on to open space. I don't think we need to cover anything. Architecture, land use density, site design is now closed. So we're on to open space. So clarifying questions on that. Soon people will have some. Yes.
Now, if I'm understanding correctly, you've taken some land from your next property over and thrown it into the park. Is that correct? How far? Like we're talking 2 feet, 3 feet?
Have to look at the
Actual dimension. Yeah. But it will increase how much space DPR has for planning purposes.
Okay.
Does that jeopardize the open space requirement for the other building?
Because that bill, it's already there. It
Right.
exists, right? So we're really just shifting it from one site to another.
We're just
it's not changing the look or feel or anything. It's still already there, right?
Right.
But will that building's open space then be deficient?
That building's open space directly interplays with whatever DPR is going to be doing anyways.
Okay, but from an open space allowance perspective, you're double counting land. Yeah.
So just high level, the building to the north is part of site plan 167. And it's a very old site plan. I'm not aware of a specific to that building open space requirement that it has to be, X% of the parcel or anything like that.
Could we look into that to make sure?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
That's-
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Now you can raise your point about that triangle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we talk about that little triangle? In other words, some idea of how, number one, how big it is, and number two, is there any constraints by the railroad on that little triangle?
Is that part of this site plan?
Yeah.
It is.
So it is part of the new site plan proposal. we would have to pull out our survey and see where that buffer, where there's essentially a no-build buffer from the railroad. I don't know if it encroaches into that triangle or not, but I'm assuming we've done our best to keep out of that no-build zone, right? So it really shouldn't, but we could check on that.
And we can check on all of this prior to SPRC2 to come prepared. From our perspective, as long as there are no, what Matt was talking about related to those train easements, we'd be happy to talk with staff about opportunities.
Is
I think
that
at a minimum,
included in the 38,000 square feet?
it is not right now. So it'd be
So
additional.
it's just leftover land right now?
On the other side.
Yeah, I think it's a potential opportunity for some. I mean, there are trees there now. Do we know how many trees and that sort of thing?
We can pull up the survey and get back to you guys on that. I think the other thing is if it is within that buffer, we'll have to look at the language of it. I mean, I think we would be willing to at least do a surface easement, right? Or you're not constructing anything, but at least it's green space and planning and stuff like that, which should not
And
be
can
in
you tell us,
conflict.
okay, can you then find out what is the square footage of it?
Mhm.
Is that square footage sufficient that, let's say, recreational use could be done? Can you put a tennis court there? I mean, I'm throwing out just what would fit there,
Yep.
if anything. Is it better, are there trees there? What sort of trees, are there weed trees that we really should be invasives that we should get rid of? Can we make it into, could be good passive park space? I mean, and we know we're going to be doing a separate park process for that. So let's make that clear for the table. SPRC will not determine what that park looks like. That'll be a separate neighborhood process. So, you guys, be aware, get ready for that. But we should at least know whether that should be included in this.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So since the park's a separate process, whether it's a passive park or something with a recreational facility, that's a whole separate process for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That will be led, my understanding is by DPR, right?
Right. And it's not CPHC that does it. It's,
Different group of people.
I do think one thing that we should think about it in that regard is that if you just visually look at like Google Earth, it's going to look bigger. As we said, when you layer in the CSX buffer zone, like we can't touch that, but I don't know if a park or some
or
improvements.
pollinator
We'll
garden,
confirm.
It could be passive.
Yes, probably tell us whether it's,
Yeah.
pollinator garden, or weed trees there.
We'll come prepared with those answers so that we can have a discussion.
That all sounds well and good from a staff perspective. We would need to study this, though. We would like to just remind people that the Crystal Park open space is called for in the sector plan as a recreational open space. So we would need to study the utilization of any additional space that's found around the site, because we really envisioned a much more open and recreational use type space. And we have Marco on the line too, if he has any additional comments from DPR.
Hi, Chrissy and everyone with the SPRC and the development team. Again, my name is Marco Rivero with the Department of Parks and Recreation. And as it was stated before by the chair, this area would be subject to a separate park master planning process. So any developable area, whether it be part of that, the proposed 38,000 square feet or anything else that may be considered, could potentially fall into that potential master planning process, which would include extensive community engagement opportunities. We would do a visioning process to understand the lay of the land, the level of service, accessibility points, you name it. So all of that would be part of the conversation. So yes, it would be part of that targeted process for the public space development in the future.
Thank you. Okay, more discussion on parks and open space. Questions?
I have a question. I'm not sure if it's an open space question or a transportation question. The bike room is at the back corner. Is there a way how are cyclists getting to that from Crystal Drive? Is there a bike path, or are they on the sidewalk or on the service road? Or I don't know if that's for this section.
For SPRC2, we were planning on showing, all types of pedestrian and bike connections and how that's going to interact.
Developing transportation.
Thanks.
Okay, my next question is there any money to develop this park? In other words, who is going to develop it when, if it goes to a park, if it goes to the Parks Department, that means it's going to be a separate budget, separate timeline, separate everything. And so when you know, where is the money going to come from?
Yeah,
Is my
Mark, do
question.
you have any comments on this? Back online.
Was that a question for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's where's the money going to come from for this
How
part?
does the process work? Who pays for it? How is the budget determined for what goes there? Basically, what does your process look like for determining what is use on this park?
So in terms of how a master planning process could occur, there's several ways in which it could be funded, whether it be through, CIP development, whether it be through a development contribution, whether it be through any other means, the TIF, the tax incremental finance, that is part of public space development within Crystal City. So there are different mechanisms that could be in place for that. Of course, that would all be part of this conversation as we move forward as to how we would get there. But those would be all of the different possibilities that could be provided for the development of this public space.
Thank you.
Is there a way that when we do the subsequent session on open space, we can talk about the phasing on that? Because one of the issues is when these parks are developed or are delivered. So I'd hate to see you finish it and then we start the master planning process and the funding process.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. So that's something that DPR and CPHD and the developer should sort of figure out and have an answer for you next time.
I did have a suggestion just for future things for this little triangle. What about a train watching place?
That's what I said for the other side.
Yeah, no, but you can, this little triangle, you can build, if you could build a couple of story little train watching thing and you have a little something ramp up, then you could have some people who could watch trains from that. And as Longbridge is well known for a train watching place, just a little train watching station, people could walk up and, kind of watch the trains as they go by, take their little kid up there and say, oh, look at the train, I'm just saying that would be, but so that's why what you can put there becomes really important, because could you put like a two-story, just a tower?
Kind of improvements.
Yeah, what kind of improvements can you put on there? So that would be something that, could be useful for that little incy space.
Good idea.
Yes.
Are we at comments yet or still?
Sure, go ahead, comments. Yeah, people absolutely, at this point, I think we're open to comments for open space.
So, so first, let me ask another process question. Forgive me. I wanted to ask about green roofs, and I'm realizing that maybe that's not a sustainability thing for next time, but a design thing. Can I just ask a green roof question?
Why not?
Do you plan on having a green roof?
We'll talk about in more detail at SPRC too. We'll talk about landscaping.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll slide on.
So just, I sound like a broken record at every meeting I go to, but the county just put out the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan, which noted that our tree canopy is in crisis, which noted that we aspire to have a 40% tree canopy. So every time I see open spaces in parks like this, even parks that are designated for recreational use, I'm thinking we got to maximize the trees. I know we're going to talk about streets next time, but I want to make sure that there's enough room for those trees to grow. But in this case, I think where I'm coming from for my commission is I appreciate your at least thinking for a couple minutes about a hybrid design that might enable you to reduce the footprint. But also I would urge the folks around the room to think about, as we think about these cool ideas about a viewing platform for railroads and all that, I'm a railroad buff. I'd be there the first day it opened. But I got to tell you, every square foot that we have to plant a tree is precious in this county. And so even if we have volleyball courts, we need to figure out how do we put trees all around them, and how do we have enough light and air and all that for the trees to thrive. So I urge you to continue to be innovative in a lot of the stuff that you've done in your designing here, and think about how we don't just get to the 38,000 square foot level by kind of annexing 3 feet at the north, but actually think creatively about how we can have maybe even more than that. I personally see that because it's in the master plan as the minimum. I don't think it's something that, well, we came close. That's not a success in my view. I think we ought to hit that mark and maybe even exceed it, because this is going to be such a pristine, wonderful spot for all these people who are going to be living around here to enjoy. So I don't know if that's basically just confirming where we're going here, but I appreciate your continued innovative thought about these things.
I definitely want to add on to your comments. First, I'd be on the train watching platform too. But do you have a count of the number of trees on the site now? How many would be coming down, and how many you intend to put up, and where they would go? Do we have a plan yet to show where the street trees are going to go and how many? Because we don't have to talk about the park area at this point because that'll be planned differently. But we do know now where the sidewalks are going to go, and trees are supposed to go along those sidewalks. How many can we put there? How many are we losing? Can we get a net gain?
We have all of that, we can come prepared for next time.
Okay.
We'll have our landscape architect also join us, answer all of the tree questions. They're very passionate about it. I love hearing all the spiels they go on. And I will also mention with the building typology that we have right now, a comment was, we haven't seen much on the inside of the building, which we'll talk about from a landscape perspective, but with the footprint now, we have this great courtyard where we also have trees and we also have that open space. So definitely looking at the landscape perspective, not just from the courtyard and the streetscape and the open space. There's a lot of components and layers.
I really appreciate that. If I could just add, so biophilic is the word of the day, the word of the day for my commission. And I think there's lots of great artistic biophilic things that get done. But to me, it comes back still fundamentally, if we can get open space with trees or shrubs or natural plantings, that's the preferred mode. So I'm glad your landscape architect is so enthused about this. And I look forward to hearing more about how that would play out.
About their design, their layers, their approach, their palettes, all of that. Yep.
Again, following up on those great comments is biophilic elements, because that's part of open space also. We've been seeing a number of buildings that have really been integrating biophilic elements into the architecture quite successfully, quite impressively. Right now, I'm really not seeing too much for this building. It's a good looking building, but I'm not picking up any biophilic vibes on it anywhere. Are there opportunities in that you can add something or add things that again would be part of the building and that would qualify as that? Now, I also understand that on the CSX track side, you're not right up against the CSX easement, that there has to be space at the fire department requiring you to have that.
Correct.
What's that going to look like? Is it just going to be asphalt slop down there so that fire trucks can go along it? Or is it going to have, let's say, some sort of low ground cover that the truck could go over when it needs to, but otherwise isn't just non-permeable asphalt? So, what ideas do you have? Because that's a fairly significant amount of space. It's wide, if you can fit a fire truck down at the entire length of the building, that's not an inconsequential amount of space.
So it's going to be narrower.
It still has to be wide enough for a truck.
Well, not a truck, they have
to walk.
They have to be able to walk.
Okay, well,
we can bring those
whatever
up.
width it is,
Yeah.
what can be there that it doesn't have to be asphalt or concrete? And again, we'd like to defer to the fire department on that, but presumably they'd allow something other than just non-permeable.
I think one of the things that we could look at immediately that we have the option to choose on the biophilic component is we had been thinking about the design, the perforation on the balconies. That could be something that we tie in to that biophilic design. So we can look at different options
Yeah,
there.
because we have one of the big buildings that's going up now in Roslyn that all the balconies are planted. And the building, it's a rental, the building owner is going to be maintaining those in some way. So it's like, wow, that was pretty impressive when we saw that. It was like,
Yeah, it takes commitment from the owner to do that.
yeah, oh, definitely, big time. But they're doing it. It was one of the big plus factors for us to approve that building. We're thrilled by it. So anyway, I'm just letting you know there's precedent within Arlington that these things can happen.
Look at it.
Just one last comment on open space. I do appreciate you trying to get to 38,000. I mean, I think that is a really big, really important number. And anything less, we're not going to be happy. And we're much, much, much happier when you get to that 38,000. And so I mean, I think that's one of our big comments from last time that Tarsi made when she was here, that, 38,000 is a big number for us. And so when you're getting there, we're a lot happier. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, one thing consistently in Crystal City, having worked in it as long as you have, is that the neighborhood is watching like hawks for open space, and for open space to be done properly and consistent with the sector plan. It's not something that anybody seems to be willing to compromise on. So just, again, I think you're probably aware of that, given all the experience you've had with all the other buildings.
It's open space. It improves our building too, right?
Right, and generally, I felt the JVG Smith gets that.
Yeah.
I'm still working with you guys because you seem to understand these
important
principles.
Value add.
Yeah. Yes.
Two questions. The inside of your building, when you have this open space, is that going to be green and have trees and plants?
It's a courtyard, yeah. We'll show that in the next.
Yeah, good. Second question, are we going to talk about the ramp coming down and the design in next time?
Yeah.
Good. Lots of questions about that.
Oh, and since you control the inside the donut, you can give us renderings on how the landscape's going to work on that.
Yeah.
What that open space will be like. Because even though it's an amenity for tenants, it's still open space.
Yeah.
So how's that going to work?
And as Eric said, that people in taller buildings can look down into it, so it's really important, besides for the tenants and the environment.
And lastly, just kind of a mention that you're now going to have a little better sidewalk along Crystal Drive, right? With this type of thing. And so one of the things we've also been trying to do is, and while it's not in this, is to get green ribbons even in Crystal City. And so one of the things this does is it's going to allow people to connect from the southern part of Crystal City to the northern part underneath this thing a lot easier, because right now the sidewalks are less than desirable or non-existent, more accurately. So, I mean, I think one of the things we're trying to do in our ideas about green ribbons is to make it not only for people, but for other types of animals, for insects, for birds, for everything else, so that you get these pathways. And while it's not part of the green ribbon, we encourage you to, in your design of the sidewalk, to include as many trees and shrubs and things like that that will allow a more greenish look than certainly currently.
Yeah, when I walk this side, it just struck me how few people are walking around compared to just 2 blocks further north, where it's always really busy. When the Trader Joe's opens, presumably that's going to bring a lot more people walking
That's the hope.
down there.
Yeah.
Those are bad, even though they still won't admit that they're opening one, but.
Need a code name.
Right, so when that happens, that presumably will also help your retail space in your building.
Yeah, 2 folks on.
Oh, okay, great. Mike and then Claire. Mike first.
Yeah, hi. I welcome all the biophilic discussion. I'd really like to see some biophilic elements in there as well. And this is one of the few buildings that's going to have really some unrestricted access to the east. So wonder what you can do with that. Also like the train idea. I was wondering about dogs and dog parks. I'm not a fan of putting open space toward dog parks, but this is a part of town where I don't know where you'd take your dog. And it's I'm wondering if it's kind of incumbent on you guys to, make sure you've got space for the dogs. Otherwise, they'll just find a spot. So I wonder if you could comment on where does dog relief areas fall into the scheme of things, and then how we can address that. Thank you.
Will you allow dogs? I assume this is a rental. You're going to allow dogs.
So we do have a pet spa that's right next to the fitness, so we can show some of that.
Okay,
as well.
Yeah, do that.
What's in a pet spa?
Your ability to wash your dogs down, your pets down, groom them, things like that. Not the kind of spot that you're
Got
talking
it.
about. Yeah.
Don't get all the dog
They get a
hairs.
little
Bathroom
treat,
too.
but not, the full.
Claire, you're up.
Yes, so not necessarily a biophilic element, but would the use of bird-friendly glass be considered, especially?
I was going to ask that same question. Thank you for raising it.
Yeah, absolutely, especially on that side where you're having the fitness center and the retail space face directly towards the park.
We are, as part of our application, GBI for the density credit, which does require bird-friendly glass, and we'll talk about it at SPRC 2 regarding sustainability.
Okay, and how far up will we go?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Other questions?
So where the dog park, what was the solution? What was the answer to that? I didn't quite understand.
We'll share the designated locations that we're planning on having for dog relief in our next presentation. What I was mentioning is we do have a pet spa that's closer to the fitness area.
Right, but that's not a dog relief area.
No,
Right.
but we'll show where we can
I
potentially.
think the concern we have is that people either go under the overpass in that park with all the pebbly rocks,
Mhm.
or in the triangle.
Right.
Next to the tracks. Okay, great. Do we have any other comments tonight? Otherwise, we can do a final go around if anybody's got any wrap-up comments. Okay, we'll just start. Leo, any further comments?
No, I think these are great improvements. Thanks for working on it, and we'll see you next time.
Ditto.
Great improvements. Definitely an improved building from last time.
Great improvements, and I hope next time for the amount coming down and how you're redesigning. So please have more details on that. Because right now it's miserable. I use it, and it's, the curves are this high, and how are you going to fix it? I'd like more details of that. Thank you.
No, just appreciate consideration.
Mike, do you have anything? Claire, do you have anything? Elizabeth, do you have anything?
I just wanted to say I'm looking forward to reading more about the sustainability report.
Okay, Mike? Anything further? Chris Ladd, anything? Haven't heard from you tonight?
Still there?
Yeah.
And
Next week, next time.
Time to shine.
And Elizabeth, anything further?
Not for me.
Okay, thank you. We can now move to public comments. Do we have anybody online first? Public comments.
No one has signed up online.
Okay, we have one in the room here.
Hi, everyone. Collier Cook. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
You have 2 minutes.
Great. If that applicant could pull up slide 32, just to disclose, I am an employee of the Airports Authority, although I'm not speaking on behalf of the Airports Authority. Make that very clear, just my comments tonight. Although I know the authority has sent a letter, and hopefully everyone's seen that letter. The walking, this is because you brought up a slide for the ramp demolition. I just have a few comments and some questions I'd like to share, or that hopefully can answer next time. I've worked at the airport for the last 10 years. I walk across that bridge every day. It's well used. It's not great, but people like to get to Crystal Drive. They don't want to go down to Route 1. There is room, and I don't, if you look at that slide, there's room for a stair tower there that you could drop, connect the viaduct down and not impact your service drive at all. And it could connect to the existing park underneath, next to the MWA headquarters building at 2733 Crystal Drive. For next time, if you could discuss how you're going to maintain pedestrian access when the ramp is demolished and when the reconstruction happens. That's going to take a very long time to do. working with CSX, the airport, it's going to take a long time to get that thing down and then rebuilt. We need to maintain pedestrian access. And second, if we do reduce the pedestrian access point to the existing Route 1 ramps, how will the pedestrian crossing of the off-ramp to northbound Route 1 be made safe for pedestrians? My observation through the years is that vehicles gain a lot of speed going across that viaduct, and putting a pedestrian crossing right there where they're making that turn to go north onto Route 1 seems to be adding a very unsafe high-speed conflict for pedestrians. With that, thank you.
Thank you. Any last chance comments before our next meeting? Hearing none, I think we can clear tonight's meeting over. Thank you for coming out, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
I got it.
Oh, so sorry.
If you haven't signed in, please do.
We'll bring as much as we can of the ramp to sign next time, but I will let you know that dependent on VDOT, what they upgrade.
I understand
Obviously,
that.
we're going through the